What we're trying to achieve with Prince of Egypt is to tell an entertaining and very personal story, but at the same time try and get the epic scale of something like David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia or some of the great biblical epic movies that have been made in the past.
We were incredibly lucky is that we're gifted with a fabulous animation crew, and the fact that so many of our artists come from all over the world. We have a great deal of European artists. I think we may have as many as 20 nationalities working on the picture.
DreamWorks brought together two of the directors of The Prince of Egypt to talk about the animation process.
So this is Simon.
And this is Steve.
And Brenda can't be with us because she's actually given birth to baby Emma now. So we're going to take you through on our own. What we're looking at is the story reel or Leica reel. Leica comes from the cameras, Leica, who were the first people who made 35mm cameras that could be single framed through. And so in the early days of Disney, the Leica reel was anything that was the assembly up before the final release print.
The nice thing about getting to make a story reel is we get to pre-make the movie before we go to the laborious trouble of animating by hand or on the computer every scene.
It's called story because you literally get to see the story play as a movie. So this sequence is the introduction of our two main characters, Ramesses and Moses. And really we wanted to show them in a completely unexpected light as teenagers, having a great time, being great friends, and enjoying an essentially irresponsible day out, because it's going to contrast so vividly with their later responsibilities and duties.
In this scene, we'll always build the sets and then put the character through this kind of maze. We wanted to make it feel like something like the French Connection or something that you couldn't possibly do in live action with a Chariot.
You'll notice, by the way, some of the storyboard drawings, these very rough sketches, look very unlike the final character designs. So there was a Moses there that looked more like some kind of Greek hero. And that's because at this point we hadn't actually got the final character designs worked out when some of these early storyboards were being done.
Yeah, and sometimes during the story process, we'll insert a shot. In the case of one we just saw, Steven Spielberg suggested that we add that down shot and also...
I'll make it all in one shot. We tilt down and see the tremendous drop down below the scaffolding. Because originally we'd done it in a series of individual shots in coverage. And Steven said, no, showed him one big master. Of course, it was horribly expensive, but hey, it's a good shot.
And you can see that at one time we used a block of rock instead of the nose.
Well, actually, the way that the nose got broken off got refined as well. It was Layout's idea to have it be the nose rather than just some block of rock. But then you'll notice in this first iteration of the sequence, it's actually a stick that the man is on that breaks the nose off, and later it became a pile of bricks because we were worried that it didn't seem quite conceivable that a big chunk of rock would be knocked off by a stick.
I remember when we were doing this sequence with the sand, we actually had no idea how we were going to achieve these shots.
Oh yeah, talk about writing checks with no idea how to cash them.
It seemed like a good idea at the time, and the effects people were able to do it.
It's going to be tremendous fun, yeah. How do we do it? No idea. So what we're now going to do is go through a work in progress, a later refinement of the same sequence. You're seeing what we call line test, which is rough animation, or sometimes the clean-up final line animation. And you'll notice that the rough animation very often flashes on and off on individual frames. This is because the animator has done key drawings, sometimes many key drawings, and left the drawings that are going to be done by his assistants and in-betweeners, left those out.
Yeah, we have a major layout conceit in this movie, is that we tried to make the architecture in the Egyptian world very flat. You'll see the capitals, for instance, on the pillars, there's no perspective on them, and that was deliberate to make it look like hieroglyphs.
But now we're out into the more organic world, moving around, and we're in a sort of true three-dimensional environment. You'll notice also sometimes that the chariots you actually see like a little scribbly drawing of a chariot happening from time to time, and those are places where the character animator has actually roughed out where the chariot's going to be. The chariots are then created as three-dimensional objects in the computer, and they are placed in where the character animator was expecting them to be. The character animator then goes back over and reworks his animation to fit within the gyrations and movements of the chariot. it takes a long time to get from one to the other. Typically, a scene will go for months before it gets... How many months to get from one end to the other?
It might take 9 months. Some complex stuff like this might take 9 months to go through the pipeline from when we first storyboard it.
Actually, a great deal of this process involves guessing at what's going to happen when the other elements are introduced. So here you can see the scaffolding is all three-dimensional work done in the computer. The characters are all two-dimensional. But then also a lot of the effects work, the dust clouds, little bits of particles and so on dropping down, are hand-drawn. So you get this layering of hand-drawn material over computer-generated material over hand-painted material. So the result is this total integration of the techniques.
Yeah, and in some cases, like the scene we're seeing now, we will throw the background out of focus. We won't paint it out of focus. We'll actually paint it in focus so we have more control over the blur level.
Yeah, make that choice about the depth of field later.
And here's a rubber stamp scene where we've actually animated one acolyte and then rubber stamped him a whole bunch of times.
Yeah, rubber stamp as in taking him and printing him over and over again. Slightly different sizes, sometimes taking it as a mirror image. But it results in you being able to have vast crowds of people, which in this movie we had to be able to do without having to employ vast crowds of animators to create them. So finally what we're going to look at is the final animation down in the bottom right hand, full finished color. And in the top left you'll see the Leica reel, the story reel that we first started off with. And as you can see, some shots remain very much the way they were storyboarded, and other shots have been refined, made more precise, they've got more dynamic as we got into actually putting them through production.
And very often you'll see a 3D element like the causeway that the guys are riding down with a flat background, like the background of the
palace and the
behind,
difference, yeah. Yeah, these very often layered together.
And that kind of tableclothy thing in the upper right, that was just a stand-in for the background so we know how fast the pan speed will be.
Yes, because when you're looking at the rough layouts, just a wall of sand, you can't tell how fast that thing's actually moving through, so you need something that you can really get your eyes attached to.
Yeah, this was a scene that actually he wasn't supposed to hit the wall like that, but the animator did that, and we thought it was so cool that we added
added little sparks afterwards.
We actually fixed the layout to make sure that he did hit the wall.
You'll notice also a number of these scenes have motion blur in them, which is a thing that was developed during the making of the movie, and I think we could have used in almost every shot in this sequence. Actually, we only got to do about 20 or 25 shots. We went back and cherry-picked which ones we wanted out of the movie overall.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't mention, actually, that the sequence going through the alleyway was a whole three-dimensional set designed and built by Harold Kraut that then had two-dimensional painted artwork, including all of the lighting, lights and shadows, painted onto the two-dimensional surfaces that were then placed against those three-dimensional shapes.
And within that, you can drop in characters, as we did.
So a lot of the crowd characters, yeah, they actually exist in space, and as you pan past them, they get larger.
Even though they're only animated at one perspective. And all those dark little dots that you see, those are actually the 2D elements on the 3D elements. Yeah.
Yes. You can see when it's actually
right there
finished off, it
bottom,
actually becomes colored very much like the 3D that it's trying to match into. A great deal of very precise work has to go into planning the colors. So, for instance, the acolytes disappearing into the distance there, very subtly shaded down. It's one of the sort of finishing processes that really doesn't get mentioned enough. Here we have enormous integration of 2D and 3D effects elements. So that's about it. An enormous amount of work goes into a sequence like this, and several hundred people to do something that flies by in a couple of seconds.